What happens when the legacy of a king is marked not by victory, but by tragedy? In the story of King David, we often focus on his great triumphs, yet the real drama unfolds in the lives of his sons. From Tamar's heartbreak to Absalom's rebellion, David's household was filled with betrayal, revenge, and ambition. But what went wrong? Could the choices of David's sons have been avoided, or were they destined to fulfill the consequences of their father's sins? This is not just an ancient story, it's a powerful lesson for us today. In this video, we'll dive into the tragic lives of David's sons, Tamar, Amnon, Absalom, Adonijah, and Solomon, and discover how their stories of lust, rebellion, ambition, and wisdom shaped the future of Israel. We'll explore the dramatic fall of a royal family and uncover the deeper lessons these biblical stories hold for our own lives. Ready to see how sin, power, and prophecy played out in David's family? King David's family is one of the most captivating stories in the Bible, full of power, love, betrayal, and, ultimately, tragedy. David's sons, while born into royalty, were far from living perfect lives. Their stories highlight the intense family drama that unfolded within the palace walls. From Tamar, the innocent daughter, to Solomon, the wisest son, every member of David's family played a pivotal role in shaping Israel's future. The tragedy of David's family reveals how even a king's house isn't immune to the consequences of sin and poor decisions. When you look at Tamar's story, her life is a portrait of innocence destroyed by a trusted family member. David's sons, such as Amnon, who committed one of the darkest crimes in the Bible, were products of their father's legacy. Each child seemed to carry the weight of their father's choices. The royal family drama of David's household invites us to examine our own lives. Are we, too, carrying the burdens of past decisions? The dysfunction in David's house didn't start with Tamar and Amnon. It was brewing long before. As you delve deeper into these biblical stories of tragedy, you'll notice that the seeds of family conflict were sown much earlier. David's affair with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah, as described in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 14 and 15, set the stage for the turmoil that would haunt his descendants. The consequences of sin in David's house didn't just affect him, it spilled over into the lives of his children. From Tamar's tragedy to Solomon's wisdom, every twist in the story points to the importance of making choices that align with God's will. So, as we begin this journey through the lives of David's sons, it's clear that their decisions didn't just affect their personal fates, they shaped the course of Israel's history. Let's start with Tamar's story and see how one terrible event began the unraveling of David's family. Tamar's story is one of the most heart-wrenching tragedies in the Bible. As the daughter of King David, she was a symbol of purity and innocence. But her life took a devastating turn when her half-brother, Amnon, became consumed by lust. This crime would shatter the family dynamic, exposing the dysfunction within David's household. Tamar's experience reveals how unchecked desires can lead to devastating consequences, not just for the individuals involved, but for the entire family. Amnon's crime against Tamar wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a betrayal of the royal family. He used manipulation and deceit to lure Tamar into his trap, highlighting the destructive nature of uncontrolled lust. After the act, Amnon's disdain for Tamar was immediate, adding insult to injury. In this biblical family conflict, the tragedy of Tamar's story also shows the deep scars that sin can leave, even in a royal household. As Tamar's innocence was stolen, the family's cracks became undeniable. Amnon's crime set the stage for more turmoil, not just within the palace but in the kingdom of Israel. Tamar's tragic fate echoes the consequences of betrayal and unchecked sin within families today. Like many survivors of trauma, Tamar was abandoned and left to carry the weight of the crime committed against her, with her family offering little comfort or justice. David, though heartbroken, failed to take decisive action against Amnon. His silence left a void that would soon be filled with anger and revenge. The royal family drama took another dark turn when Tamar's full brother Absalom quietly plotted his retaliation. Tamar's tragedy not only crushed her spirit, but also began a chain reaction of revenge, showing how sin can spiral out of control within families. This brings us to the next chapter in this dark tale, Amnon's downfall. How did Absalom, Tamar's brother, handle the aftermath of this crime? Let's explore how revenge shaped the next tragedy in David's household. Amnon's sin against Tamar wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a violation that would haunt the house of David for years to come. Amnon, as the eldest son of David, should have been an example of leadership, but instead he fell prey to his own lustful desires. His obsession with Tamar drove him to deceive and violate her, an act that not only destroyed her life, but set the stage for greater tragedy within the royal family. The tragedy of David's family unfolded as sin began to tear apart the bonds of brotherhood. The consequences of Amnon's crime went far beyond his own guilt. His actions sparked a cycle of hatred and revenge that would ultimately cost him his life. Absalom, Tamar's brother, harbored deep resentment towards Amnon for what he had done. Absalom waited for 2 years, plotting his revenge in silence. And when the time came, he struck with deadly force. Amnon's downfall was swift and violent. He was killed at a feast hosted by Absalom, bringing an end to his troubled life, as described in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 28 and 29. David's failure to punish Amnon after the crime is often seen as a pivotal moment in the unfolding tragedy of his family. As the father and king, David's inaction signaled to his children that justice could be evaded, which only fueled Absalom's desire for vengeance. This royal family drama teaches a harsh lesson about the consequences of failing to address sin and wrongdoing. In Amnon's case, his lustful crime led directly to his death, illustrating the destructive power of unchecked desires. Amnon's story is a stark reminder of how sin can spiral out of control, affecting not just the individual, but the entire family. His actions led to a chain of events that would unravel David's household, showing that moral failure often leads to catastrophic consequences. It's a lesson that resonates in families today. When sin is ignored, it festers and grows, causing pain and division. With Amnon gone, Absalom's thirst for power grew stronger. What would follow next is one of the most well-known rebellions in the Bible, Absalom's revolt against his own father, David. How did this rebellion begin, and how did it end? Let's explore the next chapter in this tragic saga. Absalom was not just Tamar's avenger. He was a son who longed for power and recognition. After orchestrating Amnon's death, Absalom fled to escape his father's wrath, but his time away only fueled his ambitions. Absalom's rebellion was more than just a quest for justice for Tamar, it was a grab for the throne. His story is a reminder of how bitterness and revenge can consume even the most promising individuals in David's family. Despite his crime, Absalom eventually returned to Jerusalem, but his relationship with David remained strained. The bitterness between father and son deepened as Absalom began to win the hearts of the people of Israel, presenting himself as a more just and capable leader than his father. The biblical family conflict escalated as Absalom gathered support for a full-scale rebellion against David, setting the stage for a war between father and son. Absalom's rise to power was swift. He declared himself king in Hebron, the same place where David had once ruled, and with a growing army, he marched toward Jerusalem. David, forced to flee his own city, saw the tragic consequences of his own past sins unfold before his eyes. Nathan's prophecy to David, found in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 10, that his household would be torn apart by the sword, was coming true. The royal family drama was now at its peak, with the kingdom divided between father and son. But Absalom's ambition would soon lead to his downfall. In a final battle between David's forces and Absalom's army, Absalom's life came to a tragic end. As he fled the battlefield, his long hair, once a symbol of his pride, became his undoing, catching in the branches of a tree. Left hanging, Absalom was struck down, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 9 through 15. With his death, David's rebellion ended. Absalom's death marked the end of one of Israel's most intense internal conflicts. Though Absalom's rebellion was over, the scars it left on David's family and kingdom were deep. Yet the power struggles in David's household were far from over. Next, we turn to another son with ambitions of his own, Adonijah. How would his rivalry with Solomon shape the future of Israel? However, Solomon, the younger son, was chosen by David and supported by the prophet Nathan and Bathsheba. This rivalry between Adonijah and Solomon would lead to yet another tragic chapter in David's family, as both brothers vied for the kingdom's highest seat. Adonijah declared himself king without David's consent, assuming the royal mantle prematurely. He gathered powerful allies, including Joab, the commander of David's army, and Abiathar, the priest, to solidify his claim. This bold move mirrored Absalom's earlier rebellion, but Adonijah's ambition lacked the widespread support needed to maintain power. The royal family drama reached a critical point, with David's household divided once again. Despite his efforts, Adonijah's ambitions were cut short when Nathan and Bathsheba intervened. They reminded David of his promise to make Solomon the next king of Israel, as recorded in 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 13. In response, David acted swiftly, ordering Solomon to be anointed king immediately. Solomon's rise to power happened quickly, effectively dismantling Adonijah's claim to the throne. This moment was a clear display of how divine favor, prophecy, and strategic alliances shaped the future of Israel. Adonijah's rise and fall didn't end with Solomon's coronation, though. Even after Solomon became king, Adonijah's ambition persisted. He requested to marry Abishag, a woman from David's court, which Solomon saw as a threat to his rule. As a result, Solomon ordered Adonijah's execution, marking a brutal end to yet another of David's sons, as recorded in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 25. This decision illustrated Solomon's resolve to maintain his authority, ensuring no rival could challenge his reign. Adonijah's story shows how ambition without divine approval can lead to downfall. As we explore Solomon's ascent, we also see the complexities of being both wise and politically astute. Solomon's reign begins with strength, but his later years reveal a tragic shift. Let's now explore the rise of Solomon, the wisest son, and how his legacy unfolded. Solomon's reign began with divine favor, wisdom, and promise. He wasn't David's eldest son, but he was the chosen one to carry on his father's legacy. Solomon's wisdom is renowned, making him a key figure in biblical history. When he asked God for wisdom instead of wealth or power, as recorded in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 9, his humility was rewarded. Solomon became famous for his wise judgments, such as the case of the two women claiming the same baby. It was clear Solomon's rise to power was different from his brothers, marked by wisdom rather than ambition. Solomon's early reign brought peace and prosperity to Israel. His construction of the temple in Jerusalem was a monumental achievement, fulfilling David's dream. Under Solomon's leadership, Israel became a wealthy and powerful nation, attracting visitors like the Queen of Sheba, who marveled at his wisdom and the splendor of his kingdom, as described in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 7. Solomon's wisdom not only guided his governance, but also influenced his writings, including Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, texts filled with life lessons. However, Solomon's reign, though wise, was not without flaws. As time went on, his choices began to reflect a drift from the principles of his early days. He accumulated wealth, horses, and wives, directly contradicting the commands given to kings in Deuteronomy. His marriage alliances, particularly with foreign women, led to the introduction of idol worship in Israel. The man who had built the temple to honor the one true God was now allowing shrines for foreign gods in his kingdom, as noted in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. This shift in Solomon's later years had tragic consequences for Israel. His kingdom, once united and prosperous, became fractured. After Solomon's death, the nation split into two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The division marked the beginning of centuries of strife, fulfilling the prophetic warnings that disobedience would bring chaos. Solomon's tragic legacy shows that even wisdom, when not aligned with God's commands, can lead to downfall. From Solomon's reign, we see the complexity of leadership and the consequences of drifting from God's will. But it's not just Solomon's story that reveals this pattern. David's entire household suffered due to sin's ripple effect. Next, we'll explore how the dysfunction of David's family, rooted in moral failures, shaped their tragic ends. David's family dysfunction can be traced back to his own moral failings. His affair with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 14 through 17, set off a chain reaction that would ripple through his household. Nathan, the prophet, foretold that the sword would never depart from David's family, as stated in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 10. And indeed, his sons' lives were marked by violence, betrayal, and tragedy. David's actions with Bathsheba demonstrated that even a king anointed by God could face dire consequences for sin. One of the earliest examples of this dysfunction is found in the story of Amnon and Tamar. Amnon's crime against his half-sister Tamar was not only a personal tragedy, but also a reflection of how David's unchecked sin had manifested in the next generation. David's inability to bring justice after Amnon's act further fractured his family, allowing resentment to fester within Absalom, Tamar's brother. Absalom's rebellion is another direct result of the dysfunction in David's household. After taking matters into his own hands and avenging Tamar by killing Amnon, Absalom fled, and his relationship with David was never fully restored. His rebellion against his father later on was not just a political move, but also a deeply personal one, stemming from the unresolved issues within their family. Absalom's tragic death in battle, as described in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 14 and 15, only further highlighted the fallout from David's own failings. Adonijah's ambition to take the throne was another example of the chaos that reigned within David's household. With Solomon already chosen as David's successor, Adonijah's attempts to seize power only added to the tension and division within the royal family. In the end, Adonijah's downfall echoed the tragic fate of his brothers, showing how the sins of the father had far-reaching consequences. David's own moral failures not only led to personal suffering, but also destabilized his entire family. Each of his sons' tragic ends can be seen as a result of the dysfunction that was seeded through sin. Yet, this dysfunction was also tied to the fulfillment of prophetic words. Next, we'll explore the role of prophecy and how Nathan's words to David unfolded within his family's story. Nathan's prophecy to David was a pivotal moment in the story of his family. After David's sin with Bathsheba, Nathan confronted him with a sobering message: "The sword will never depart from your house." 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 10. This prophecy foreshadowed the turmoil, tragedy, and division that would haunt David's sons for generations. The consequences of David's sin were not limited to his own life. They stretched far into his family's future, as Nathan had warned. The prophecy became a bitter reality when David's household began to unravel, starting with Amnon's crime against Tamar. Nathan's words were clear. Violence and division would plague David's house, and Amnon's fate was the first tragic fulfillment of that prophecy. When Absalom killed Amnon in revenge, it reinforced the notion that the sword, once set in motion, would continue to cut deep into David's family. Absalom's rebellion was another unfolding of Nathan's prophecy. By rising against his own father, Absalom embodied the internal strife Nathan had foretold. His rebellion wasn't just a political move, it was a manifestation of the deep-rooted conflict that stemmed from David's past mistakes. When Absalom was ultimately killed in battle, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 14 through 15, it served as yet another painful fulfillment of the prophecy's tragic course. Adonijah's ambition to take the throne from Solomon reflected yet another piece of the prophecy coming to life. The rivalry and division within the royal family mirrored the ongoing consequences Nathan had predicted. Despite David's attempts to manage the succession, the prophecy of unrest and division was undeniable, and Adonijah's demise, as described in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 25, was another testament to the prophecy's fulfillment. Nathan's prophecy served as a constant reminder that sin carries consequences far beyond the immediate moment. David's household was fractured not just by personal failings, but by the divine judgment that followed. As we reflect on the weight of this prophecy, we are left with profound lessons about sin, consequence, and legacy. Lessons that can be drawn from the lives of David's sons. The lives of David's sons offer profound lessons on the consequences of sin, pride, and unchecked ambition. Tamar's story teaches us about the vulnerability of innocence in a world where power can be abused. Her tragic experience with Amnon reminds us of the devastating effects of exploitation and the importance of justice and protection for the vulnerable. Tamar's story echoes through history, urging us to reflect on the impact of silence in the face of wrongdoing. Amnon's downfall shows the dangerous path of unrestrained desire. His sin against Tamar not only destroyed her life, but also sealed his own tragic fate. His lack of repentance serves as a powerful reminder that unchecked sin festers, leading to even more destruction. Amnon's story is a sobering example of how lust and selfishness can tear families apart and create ripple effects that are felt for generations. Absalom's rebellion highlights the consequences of unresolved anger and revenge. While his desire to avenge Tamar seemed justifiable, his actions eventually led to his own downfall. Absalom's story warns against letting bitterness and a thirst for vengeance consume us. His life reminds us that while seeking justice is important, letting anger take control can lead to devastating consequences for ourselves and others. Adonijah's ambition reveals the dangers of pride and impatience. His attempt to seize the throne before God's appointed time reflects the consequences of acting outside of divine timing. Adonijah's story serves as a lesson that striving for power without seeking God's will can lead to personal destruction. His rivalry with Solomon underscores the importance of humility and waiting for God's plan to unfold. Solomon's wisdom and eventual downfall provide the final lesson from David's sons. Though he was known for his extraordinary wisdom, Solomon's later choices led to the division of the kingdom after his reign, as described in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 11. His story reminds us that even those blessed with great wisdom can fall if they lose sight of God's commands. The lessons from these brothers resonate with all who seek to navigate the complexities of life, ambition, and faith. The tragic fates of David's sons didn't just affect their immediate family, their choices and actions had a lasting impact on the entire kingdom of Israel. The chaos and division within David's household eventually seeped into the nation, sowing seeds of discord that would last for generations. The ripple effect of David's personal sins, combined with the ambitions and downfalls of his sons, led to a fractured kingdom that struggled to find stability. Absalom's rebellion, for example, temporarily divided the kingdom, pitting father against son and causing widespread unrest. Though David eventually regained control, the scars of that conflict lingered, weakening the unity of Israel. The nation's internal divisions reflected the disarray in David's household, setting the stage for future rebellions and challenges to the throne. Solomon's reign, marked by unparalleled wisdom and prosperity, still ended in division. His failure to maintain spiritual integrity and his indulgence in foreign alliances caused discontent among the people. After his death, Israel was split into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south, as recorded in 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 16 through 24. This division marked the beginning of a long period of instability and conflict, a direct result of the fractured legacy left by David's sons. The stories of David's family show us how personal decisions can have national consequences. The moral and spiritual breakdown within David's household didn't stay confined to the palace. It spread to the people they were meant to lead. As Israel faced future turmoil, the echoes of David's family drama served as a reminder of how fragile leadership can be when it's not rooted in righteousness. As we reflect on the tragic legacy of David's sons, it's clear that their lives were a warning for future generations. The brokenness in David's family became a symbol of the consequences of sin and the importance of aligning leadership with God's will. The lessons from their stories resonate deeply for anyone seeking to understand how personal choices can shape the destiny of many. Now that we've uncovered the tragic end of David's sons, what lessons can you apply to your own life? The stories of Tamar, Amnon, Absalom, Adonijah, and Solomon reveal the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition, betrayal, and the failure to uphold moral values. Are there areas in your life where past mistakes continue to affect your present or future? How will you respond to the conflicts and temptations you face, knowing the impact they can have not just on you, but on generations to come? The stories in David's family show us the importance of taking responsibility for our actions and seeking wisdom, much like Solomon did early in his reign. What steps can you take today to align your decisions with a legacy of faith and integrity? If you're ready to explore more biblical lessons that can transform your life, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.